Japan today is a place of discipline, technology, anime, and undeniable peace. But behind this calm, polite image lies a history absolutely soaked in blood, honor, betrayal, and unimaginable suffering. This isn't the Japan you see on postcards. This is the brutal Japan where warriors chose death over defeat, where cities were swallowed by firestorms, and where the sky itself fell in nuclear flames. This is the dark and goosebump-inducing history of Japan. For nearly 700 years, Japan was ruled not by politicians, but by samurai warriors. Their entire existence was governed by Bushido, the way of the warrior. And in this world, honor was everything. Failure wasn't just a mistake. It was unforgivable. If a samurai lost a battle, insulted his lord, or felt even a hint of shame, he didn't write an apology letter. He killed himself. This ritual, called seppuku, was excruciating. It involved cutting open the stomach with a short blade, slowly and deliberately. While this happened, another warrior, often a trusted friend, stood by with a sword, ready to deliver a final, merciful beheading. This wasn't some rare, dramatic event. It was an accepted part of their culture. To prepare for this life of violence, samurai practiced their killing techniques daily. And who did they practice on? Sometimes peasants who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time were used as living practice targets. The Japan of this era was anything but peaceful. It was a constant, swirling vortex of civil war, betrayal, and executions. This violence reached its absolute peak during the Sengoku period, which literally means the age of warring states. It was a time when Japan was eating itself alive. Feudal lords betrayed other lords, often their own allies. Brothers murdered brothers to seize power. Entire villages could be peaceful one day, and a smoldering ruin the next, burned to the ground overnight. One of the most famous warlords of this time, Oda Nobunaga, was a brilliant but ruthless leader. He saw the rising influence of Buddhist monasteries as a threat to his absolute power. His solution? He massacred them. His armies slaughtered thousands. Monks, women, and even children were cut down without mercy. Eyewitness accounts from this period describe corpses being stacked like firewood and heads being collected as gruesome trophies of victory. Japan was unrecognizable a nation, devouring itself in a frenzy of ambition and blood. Then, in the 1600s, something shifted. Japan decided to shut itself off from the rest of the world. This period of isolation lasted for over 2 centuries. But this peace came at a terrible price. Any foreigner who dared to set foot on Japanese soil was executed. Christianity, which had begun to spread, was seen as a dangerous foreign influence and was brutally suppressed. Christians were hunted down, tortured, and crucified. Authorities devised a cruel test. Suspected believers were forced to step on images of Jesus or the Virgin Mary. If they hesitated or refused, their fate was sealed. They were boiled alive in hot springs or tied up and drowned. A strange, eerie peace fell over Japan, but it was a peace forged through absolute fear and total control. Fast forward to the early 1900s, and Japan transformed again, this time into a fearsome military empire. Driven by a desire for resources and a belief in its own racial superiority, Japan began a campaign of brutal conquest across Asia. It invaded Korea, China, and much of Southeast Asia. And this is where the story takes its darkest turn. In 1937, Japanese soldiers marched into the Chinese capital city of Nanjing. What followed was not a battle. It was pure, unadulterated horror. In just a few weeks, an estimated 200,000 civilians were killed. Women and young girls were systematically raped, often in front of their horrified families. Babies were bayoneted. Prisoners of war were buried alive in mass graves. Some Japanese soldiers even held competitions to see who could behead the most people with their swords. This wasn't war. This was systematic, industrial-scale cruelty. But the horror didn't stop there. In a secret facility in occupied China, the Japanese army ran a research unit known as Unit 731. This place was a real-life house of horrors, a medical nightmare from which no one escaped. Under the guise of research, Japanese doctors committed unspeakable acts. They intentionally infected prisoners with diseases like the plague and cholera to study their effects. They would freeze prisoners' limbs solid and then thaw them to study the progression of gangrene. And most horrifically, they performed vivisections dissecting people while they were still alive, often without any anesthesia. The victims of these experiments included men, women, and even children. It was a complete abandonment of humanity. By 1945, the war was turning against Japan, but its military government refused to surrender, vowing to fight to the last man, woman, and child. Then came Hiroshima. On a clear August morning, a single American bomb erased an entire city in a flash of light. The heat was so intense that it left the shadows of people permanently burned onto walls and pavement. Tens of thousands died instantly. 3 days later, it happened again, this time in Nagasaki. Another city vanished under a mushroom cloud. Those who survived the initial blast often suffered a worse fate, melting slowly and painfully from radiation sickness in the weeks and months that followed. The brutal empire of Japan, which had inflicted so much suffering on others, was now broken beyond imagination. Japan surrendered. The emperor, who had been worshipped as a living god, went on the radio and announced to a stunned nation that he was, in fact, just a human. The samurai ideals that had fueled centuries of warrior culture collapsed overnight. The military that had once terrorized a continent was dismantled. And out of those atomic ashes, a new Japan began to rebuild itself. It became the nation we know today, peaceful, disciplined, and a technological powerhouse. But the scars, both physical and psychological, never truly disappeared. Japan's history teaches us a terrifying lesson. It shows how a nation built on principles like honor and loyalty can become a nation of horror. It proves how discipline, when taken to an extreme, can morph into cold-blooded cruelty. And it's a stark reminder that a sense of duty, when not guided by a moral compass, can erase our very humanity. Japan rose from the shadows of blood, fire, and nuclear fallout. But its past stands as a permanent warning that no civilization, no matter how advanced or orderly, is immune to its own darkness. If this story gave you goosebumps, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into the dark side of history, and let me know in the comments which country's brutal past you want to explore next. Thanks for watching.